The wind reached the ranch gate first. It lifted dust in a slow ribbon and curled it around the iron crossbars, as if testing the place for weakness. Ada Lark watched from the saddle with her hat pulled low. The night was a thin blue bruise. Crickets, a coyote far off. The moon pressed a cold coin to the prairie and made the barbed wire shine. She should not have come alone. She told herself that twice and kept going. The gate to Hollow Creek Ranch stood ahead, tall and black. It had guarded the Lark family land for 20 years, since before her father's heart failed in the branding yard. Tonight it felt like a border between the life she had been promised and the truth she could no longer run from. Ada nudged her mare forward. The leather creaked. The horse breathed mist. She had a letter in her coat pocket, folded and refolded until the paper felt like cloth. She had read it enough times to taste the ink. Another shipment missing. Another lie. Another night when the foreman said the cattle simply wandered. 50 head do not wander. 50 head are driven. Boone Calder leaned on the far post. She did not see him at first. He was a dark shape, learned from the land, shoulders cut from quiet work, hat brim low, eyes steady. He pushed away from the post when she drew near. The gate shadow crossed his jaw like a brand. He looked at Ada as if the night had decided something for both of them. "You should not be here, Miss Lark," he said. The words sounded like gravel in a cool stream. "Not tonight. This is my gate," she said. "My name is on that arch. I will stand where I please." He did not argue. Boone kept his hands visible and still. A man of few words, everyone said. A past you did not ask about. He had drifted in after the winter snows and worked hard for quiet pay. And in the months since he had built fences that held and fixed hinges that did not complain. The ranch trusted his hands. Ada did not trust much, but she trusted the care in his silence. "There is trouble," he said. "I know." He studied her face. He had a way of listening that changed the shape of a conversation. It made people tell more than they meant. But Ada had decided. She had spent the afternoon in the old tack room, sorting through a chest of her father's notes, and found figures that did not balance, brands that did not match, a pattern that hid in plain sight. Men she had fed at her table were stealing her life by the wagon load. "Who is at the gate, Boone?" she asked. "Royce Maddox," he said, "and 2 men I do not know. They are waiting for Silas to open. They think you will be asleep. They think I am nobody." Royce. The name brought the taste of iron to her mouth. He had courted her once with a smile that never reached his eyes. He had talked about partnership and safety, then turned away when she said the ranch was not for sale. He worked for traders downriver now. Men who bought cheap and sold dear, men with wagons that travelled by night. "What do they want?" she asked. He watched the road, to take, to frighten, to show you who makes the rules. "Not tonight," she said, and felt the words settle into the bones of the saddle. Boone moved closer. He did not touch her, but she felt the weight of his nearness like a blanket pulled to her chin. He smelled of clean sweat and cedar smoke. His presence quieted the noise inside her. She saw a scar near his collar and wondered what blade had written it. She wondered who had held him before the wind did. "You are shaking," he said. "I am not afraid. That is not what I said." A breath slipped out of her. The night pressed closer. Somewhere in the house behind them, a lamp moved from one window to another. Silas Crowley, the foreman, had said he would watch the yard. He was not here. The letter in her pocket felt heavier. Boone's gaze sharpened. The men at the gate rose from their crouch. A match flared and went out. A laugh cut the dark. Royce Maddox called her name as if he had every right to it. Ada Lark. He made her last name sound like a dare. "Open up, sweetheart. We got business to mend. No reason for this to get messy." The wind carried the scent of whiskey and horses. Boone stood half a step in front of her. His right hand hovered near the holster, but did not settle. He was a man who chose when to touch. He was a man who let a choice ripen. "You cannot outshoot 3, Ada said. "That is correct," Boone said. "But they do not know my mind." He turned his face to hers. The moon caught his eyes and showed a quiet that was not weakness, the kind of quiet that had lived through storms. He stepped closer. She felt the warmth of him through her coat, like a slow fire. Her breath moved in small, steady tides. The silence between them thickened and softened in the same moment. "What are you doing?" she asked. Listening, he said, "To what?" "To the part of you that already knows what to do." A flush rose in her throat, not shame, not fear, recognition, a hunger for a thing that was not only desire, but something deeper, safety. She had not known how starved she was for a voice that did not aim to change her. The night shifted. Their nearness made the cold seem honest rather than cruel. But then she whispered, almost to herself, "My father trusted the wrong men. I will not do that again." Boone did not move. "Then do not trust me," he said. "Trust the wind. Trust your ear. It is speaking plain." A shot cracked the dark. Wood splintered from the gate latch and showered the dirt like brittle rain. The mare flinched. Ada held the reins firm and tasted gunpowder. Royce laughed again, louder now. "You hear that, sweetheart? We are done with manners." Boone's hand settled at last on the pistol. He did not draw. He breathed once, deep and slow, as if counting the room that was not there. Ada heard her pulse in her throat. She felt the old wound that had lived in her since the day her father died, the ache of holding a thing alone. The ache loosened just a little, because Boone was near, and his quiet felt like a wall that would not break. "We could flee to the south pasture," he said. "The creek bends. Cottonwoods hide the trail. But if they take the yard tonight, they will return with more. The only safe road is the one that does not run. So we hold," she said, "we hold." Another shot. The lock jerked. The iron groaned. Royce shouted to the men to push. The gate shifted 3 inches and stuck. Ada swung down from the saddle. The ground felt steady. She walked to the lantern hung on the post and lit it with flint and patience. The light threw her face into warm gold and left the rest of the world blue and thin. Boone watched her. The flame painted his eyes with a soft heat that surprised her. He took the second lantern from the rail and lit it. Together they set the lamps on either side of the gate so the intruders would have to look straight into the light. "You are making targets," he said. "I am making witnesses," she said. "If I die, the light will say who did it." He almost smiled, not cruel, not mocking, something like respect. The word settled between them without sound. The men shoved. The latch shrieked and held. Royce cursed. He told the others to step back. In the lean silence that followed, Ada felt the world tilt, the way a horse shifts its weight before it bolts. She knew what would come next. Gunfire. A rush. A test of who wanted the night more. Ada turned to Boone. For a breath, they stood so close she could feel the slow roll of his chest. His hand, the one with the faded scar, lifted, then stopped in the space between them. He did not touch her. She wanted him to. The want shocked her. It was not the hunger that had fooled her before. It was not the need to be chosen. It was the simple wish to be steadied by a presence that kept its promises. "If I fall," she said, "keep the house safe. The journals are under the floorboard by the stove." "You will not fall," he said. "You cannot know that." He looked at her mouth, then at her eyes. He nodded once. "I can know what I will do." The night drew a tight line. Royce gave the order. Boots pounded the dirt. The first man raised his gun and fired wild into the glow. Sparks leaped from the iron as the bullet kissed the hinge. Ada lifted her rifle and felt the old lesson take her bones. Breathe. Hold. Choose. She chose. The shot rolled through the gate like thunder along a canyon wall. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The night still holds more to tell. Like, share, or speak your name in the dust if you are still with us. Your voice keeps this fire burning for the next part. The echo rolled away across the plains and left a silence so sharp it hummed. The air smelled of smoke, iron, and something ancient that always wakes after a gun is fired. Ada held her breath until her body remembered how to breathe again. Her rifle was warm against her palm. Boone hadn't moved. He still stood at the gate, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. Then came the groan of a wounded horse, the shuffling of boots, and Royce's voice, low now, cut with disbelief. "Hellfire! She ain't bluffin'!" Ada felt the weight of it, how shock sounded when pride cracked. She chambered another round, though her hands trembled more than she wanted them to. Boone glanced at her and nodded once, wordless approval. The men outside muttered, arguing. One cursed, another hissed for silence. Boone stepped closer to the lantern light. "You best leave while you still can," he called. His voice didn't rise. It settled in the dark like a stone in a pond, rippling outward, calm and certain. No answer came, only the sound of Royce spitting into the dirt. "You got spirit, Ada," he said finally, voice oiled with mockery. "But spirit won't save your cattle or your land. You'll run dry before winter. You'll come begging to sell, and I'll be here when you do." She wanted to shout back, but Boone's hand lifted slightly, a quiet signal. Don't feed the fire. The men retreated at last, their shadows thinning into the prairie night. Only the rattle of loose reins and the slow rhythm of hooves fading down the road remained. When silence finally settled, Ada felt her knees weaken. The rifle slipped from her grip and hit the dust. Boone caught her elbow before she fell. "It's over," he said. But the tremor in his voice told her even he didn't believe that. Gunfire at the ranch gate never ends with one night. It sends messages through the territory, messages that draw wolves. They stood there a long time, watching the smoke drift. Then Boone reached down, picked up her rifle, and checked the chamber. "You hit the post clean," he said softly. "Could have taken his hat off if you'd meant to." Ada tried to smile, but the ache in her chest wouldn't let her. She looked toward the house, one lamp still glowing in the kitchen window. "Silas should have been here," she whispered. Boone's eyes darkened. He wasn't. The words carried more weight than they should have. She turned to him. "You think he knew?" Boone didn't answer right away. He slid the rifle strap over his shoulder and looked out at the road where the dust was still settling. "I think," he said slowly, "men who talk loud about loyalty are often the first to run." Ada wanted to argue, to defend the man who'd worked beside her father for years. But deep down, a quiet truth stirred. There had been signs, missing ledgers, odd deliveries, the way Silas stopped meeting her eyes. She took a breath. The night wind cut through her coat, smelled of sage and burned powder. "If Silas turned, we're alone now," she said. Boone's gaze returned to her. "You've got me." The words fell simple as gravel, but they hit something tender. For a heartbeat, she didn't know what to do with them. She looked away toward the barn, where the horses shifted uneasily in their stalls. "I don't even know who you really are," she said quietly. Boone smiled without warmth. "No one does. That's why I keep breathing." Ada turned toward him fully. "You've seen trouble before." He didn't deny it. "I've seen what greed does to men, what loneliness does to women. Sometimes they look the same in the end." His words hung between them, heavy as the smoke. Ada felt the truth in them, the kind that comes from scars, not stories. She started walking toward the house. Boone followed, his boots crunching softly behind her. Inside, the old clock ticked too loud for the hour. She poured 2 cups of whiskey and handed him one. "Thank you," she said. He didn't answer, just lifted the cup in quiet acknowledgement. The fire in the hearth threw restless light across his face, tracing the line of that scar near his collar again. Ada sat down opposite him. The silence between them changed, less brittle now, more alive. For the first time since her father's death, the ranch didn't feel empty. It felt watched over. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Boone stood, walked to the door, and checked the lock. His shoulders were broad, his movements deliberate. She watched him like someone watches a storm, afraid but unable to look away. "Boone," she said softly. He turned. "If they come back, will you stand again?" He studied her long enough that the fire cracked in the silence. "I'll stand," he said finally. "But if I do, there's no going back to peace. You understand that?" She nodded. Peace had left this place long before tonight. Boone's jaw tightened, as if he wanted to say more, but didn't trust the words. He glanced once toward the window. The moonlight silvered the edge of his profile. "Get some rest, Miss Lark," he said. "Tomorrow we'll ask more of you." Ada watched him step outside into the night. The wind caught the door for a moment before it shut, letting in the scent of dust and rain. She sat by the fire until dawn began to blush along the horizon. Only then did she realize her hands still trembled, not from fear, but from something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. Out at the gate, Boone leaned against the post where it had all begun. He watched the road fade into the distance, then looked back at the house. His jaw set hard, but his eyes softened. "Let them come," he murmured. "This time we'll be ready." The wind answered with a low sigh through the wire fence, as if the land itself had heard him. In that sound, something unspoken took root between them, quiet as a promise, strong as the dust that never leaves a man's boots. If this story still lingers in your chest like smoke after gunfire, stay close. The night hasn't finished speaking yet. By morning, the world looked almost clean again. The sky stretched wide and blue, as if the night before had never happened, but the gate still bore the scar, a bullet hole through the iron latch, black and smoking at the edges. Ada stood before it with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Her hands were steady now, but her mind wasn't. The silence after violence always rang the loudest. Boone was already out in the yard, tightening the fence near the corral. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, skin dark from the sun, movements unhurried. She watched him longer than she meant to. He worked like a man who'd learned patience the hard way. "Coffee?" she called out. He straightened, looked over, and nodded once. "Appreciate it." When he took the cup from her, their fingers brushed. Just a touch. Nothing meant. Everything felt. He drank, eyes scanning the road. "Tracks," he said. "3 horses, 2 heavier, 1 light. They turned east by the creek." "You tracked them?" He nodded. "They camped near the ridge before dawn, then split." "Royce?" "Couldn't see him, but someone left this." Boone reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a piece of torn paper. Ada unfolded it. The handwriting was rough, hurried. "You can't hold what was never yours to keep." Her throat tightened. "He left this? Or someone who wants you to think he did?" Boone's tone was flat, but his eyes were sharp. "Either way, it's bait." Ada looked toward the house. The ranch had always been her father's dream, a place built from grit and faith. Now it felt like a secret she didn't understand. She turned back to Boone. "You said last night peace wouldn't come back if you stood with me. Did you mean that?" He met her eyes. "Yes." "Then why stay?" He studied her a moment before answering. "Because something here feels worth guarding, and that's rare." His words caught her off guard, simple, quiet, and far too close to the truth she didn't dare name. Before she could answer, the sound of hooves cut through the morning air. 2 riders approached from the south. The dust behind them shimmered in the light. Boone's hand drifted toward his holster, but Ada lifted hers in a small, calming gesture. "It's Sheriff Danner," she said, "and—" she squinted, "Silas." Boone's jaw tightened. He found his courage after sunrise. The riders slowed near the barn. Sheriff Danner dismounted, his badge dull with dust, eyes tired but sharp. Silas followed, hat pulled low, face unreadable. "Morning, Miss Lark," Danner said. "Heard trouble at your gate last night." "Word travels fast," Ada replied. "In this county, gunfire's a sermon everyone listens to." The sheriff glanced at Boone. "You put a bullet in my sky again, Calder." Boone didn't flinch. "Only when it's called for," Danner grunted, half amused. "Heard Royce Maddox was behind it." Ada hesitated. "He was, but there's more to it." She looked at Silas. "I expected you here last night." Silas shifted in his saddle. "Wasn't my post, ma'am. You said Boone had the gate. I said you'd watch the yard." He met her stare without blinking. "And I did, from the ridge, saw the whole mess, figured best not to run into stray bullets. Boone's hand flexed slightly at his side, but he stayed silent. The sheriff sighed. Royce won't stop. He's been muscling ranchers all summer, trying to buy cheap before the drought hits. I won't sell, Ada said. Dana looked at her with a kind of weary respect. That's what your father said too. Cost him plenty. The words hung heavy. Ada swallowed hard. The sheriff tipped his hat. I'll send a deputy to ride the boundary tonight. Keep that gate locked. When he and Silas turned to leave, Boone stepped forward. Silas, he said quietly. The foreman paused. You left tracks near the East Creek before dawn. Why? Silas's jaw tightened. Checking fence line. Fence line doesn't run east. That's Maddox's trail. A long pause, the kind that stretches just before a lie breaks. Then Silas forced a smile. You sure like poking around other men's business, Calder. Boone said nothing, just watched him ride off until the dust swallowed him whole. Ada stood still, heart thudding. He's lying. Yes. Why protect him? Because truth told too early burns what you're trying to save. She looked at him, unsure whether that was wisdom or warning. Boone turned back to the gate, his shadow long against the sun. That night, Ada couldn't sleep. Every creak of wood felt like a whisper. Every gust of wind sounded like boots in the dirt. She rose, wrapped in her father's old coat, and walked to the porch. The moon hung low, spilling silver over the corral. Boone sat by the fence post, rifle across his knees, firelight licking the edge of his hat. He looked up when she stepped outside. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head. Every sound feels like a threat. It is, until you stop waiting for it. She moved closer, the cold air threading between them. Were you always this calm? No, he said, but I learned something. Fear is a horse. You either ride it, or it rides you. Ada leaned against the post beside him. The fire cracked softly. For a long time, neither spoke. Her shoulder brushed his arm by accident, or maybe on purpose. Neither pulled away. Boone, she said quietly, why do I feel like I've known you longer than I have? He stared into the flames. Because, maybe, you've met men who looked like me, but not one who stayed. Something inside her broke open at that. Not loudly, just a small, quiet ache that felt like truth. Boone turned his head slightly, close enough for her to see the flicker of firelight in his eyes. You don't have to fight this alone, he said. Ada swallowed. Maybe I don't trust that yet. You don't have to. Just don't walk away from it. The night wind stirred her hair, carried the faint scent of smoke and sage. She breathed it in and felt the fear ease, inch by inch. From the darkness beyond the barn came a low, distant creak, like a gate moving where no gate should. Boone's head snapped up. The calm was gone, replaced by something sharp and ready. He rose, rifle in hand. Stay here. Ada caught his sleeve. No, not this time. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither the fire nor the wind dared move. If your heart felt that stillness before the next storm, stay close. The night hasn't finished testing them yet. The sound came again, metal against wood. A soft creak drawn out like a whisper that didn't want to be heard. Boone froze, head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing toward the barn. Ada held her breath. The night stretched thin around them, the firelight dimming to a faint pulse. "Inside?" she whispered. He nodded once. Someone's moving where no one should. The air felt heavier now, the kind that knows it's about to hold gunpowder. Boone motioned for her to stay, but Ada was already reaching for the shotgun by the porch post. "I said stay," he murmured, "and I said I'm done waiting." For a second their eyes locked, steel meeting flame. Boone wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. Not stubbornness, not pride, just quiet resolve. He gave a small nod. "Stay behind me, then." They crossed the yard, boots sinking into soft dust. The moonlight pooled silver around the barn, where shadows flickered in broken lines through the slats. A faint scrape echoed, a shovel or boot against the hayloft floor. Boone moved first. His hand brushed the door latch, slow, deliberate. He mouthed 3, and on the silent count he swung it open. Darkness waited, then a blur of movement. A man lunged from the side, blade flashing in the dim. Boone caught his wrist, twisted, slammed him against the post. The knife clattered to the ground. Ada stepped forward, shotgun raised. The lantern Boone carried swung from its hook, spilling trembling light across the stranger's face. It wasn't Royce, it was Silas. His face was pale, jaw bleeding from Boone's strike, eyes wide and feral. "Silas," Ada said, breathless. "Why?" He spat into the dirt. "Because loyalty doesn't feed a man anymore." Boone's grip tightened. "You were with Maddox." Silas didn't deny it. "Been with him since the spring. While you two were dreaming about honor, he was making plans. The herds are already gone, half sold by now." Ada's throat closed. "You sold my father's herd?" "Not yours any more," Silas hissed. "You think this land owes you? Your daddy made deals he couldn't finish." "Maddox just came to collect." Boone slammed him harder into the beam. "You came here to steal more? To bury proof?" His eyes flicked toward the hayloft. "Ledger's up there. Maddox said burn it before sunrise." Boone cursed under his breath. Ada stepped closer. "And what were you going to do if we caught you?" Silas sneered, teeth red with blood. "Hope you didn't." Boone's eyes darkened. "You're riding out of here in irons." Silas laughed, a low, broken sound. "You don't understand, Calder. Maddox isn't coming alone next time. He's bringing 6 men, maybe more. He wants the ranch clean. He wants her." The word hung in the air before Ada's slap cut it short. Boone's jaw clenched. He shoved Silas toward the wall and bound his wrists with the rope from the tack shelf. "You'll talk to the sheriff at dawn," Boone said. Silas smirked, a streak of defiance glinting in his eyes. "If you live that long." Boone turned to Ada. "We can't stay here tonight." "If he's right, Maddox rides by sunrise." Ada's pulse thudded. "And if we run?" "They'll burn what's left. We stay. We fight." She looked at Silas. "He's one of them. He knows the gate, the trails, every blind turn on this ranch." Boone's voice lowered. "Then he's more useful alive." Ada met Boone's gaze. "You don't believe that." He didn't answer. The silence said enough. They dragged Silas to the bunkhouse and locked him inside. Boone barred the door and checked the window twice. When they stepped back onto the porch, the night had shifted. The wind had died. The stars had sharpened. That stillness before a storm that every rancher knows but never gets used to. Ada leaned against the railing, eyes on the horizon. "I grew up thinking this land was safe," she said quietly, "that its silence meant peace. But I think it just means no one's listening." Boone stood beside her. "Land never promises safety, only belonging. You decide which it gives you." She turned to him. His face was half in shadow, half in firelight. "You talk like you've buried something out here," she said. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Maybe I have. Someone." He didn't look away. "A man who thought the world owed him forgiveness. I stopped waiting for that." The words brushed something deep inside her. The ache of loss meeting another ache just like it. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire inside the lantern hissed softly, catching on a slow gust of wind. Ada stepped closer. "You could leave," she said. "No one's asking you to stay." He looked at her, voice low and rough. "You didn't have to ask." That silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of what hadn't been said, what couldn't yet be said. A distant thunder rumbled, too steady, too hollow for storm clouds. Boone's eyes lifted. "Riders!" He moved fast, checking his revolver, counting cartridges. Ada grabbed her rifle and blew out the lanterns to cut the light. They crouched by the porch rail, eyes fixed on the dark horizon where faint orange sparks moved. Torches. 6, maybe 7, Boone murmured. He wasn't lying. Ada's pulse quickened, but her fear no longer felt cold. It burned. "Then we hold the line." Boone nodded, his hand brushing hers for a second, steadying, grounding, a wordless vow. In the barn behind them, the horses stirred, hooves shifting restlessly. Silas began to shout through the bunkhouse door, muffled and panicked. "You don't understand. He'll kill us all." Boone's voice dropped to a whisper. "Too late for fear." The torches drew closer. The dust began to rise again. And under that vast western sky, the gate that had seen betrayal once was about to see blood again. If this story has stirred something fierce and fragile inside you, stay close. The night's fire hasn't burned its last yet. The night never really ended. It just changed color. By the time the first grey light touched the sky, the torches were already close enough for Ada to count them. 7 men, riding in a crooked line, their shapes melting in the morning dust. Boone crouched low behind the corral fence, eyes calm, breath steady. "Wait for the first shot," he murmured. "Let them think we're sleeping." Ada nodded, her pulse quick and uneven. The rifle trembled slightly in her hands. Boone noticed. He reached over and pressed his palm lightly over hers. Not a command, just an anchor. "Steady," he said. "You only miss when you rush." She took a slow breath, letting his voice settle her heartbeat. "I'm not rushing," she whispered. "No," he said, eyes still on the horizon. "You're remembering." The first bullet came from the east ridge, snapping through the fence post an inch from Boone's shoulder. Then chaos broke loose. Gunfire echoed like thunder rolling down a canyon. Wood splintered, glass shattered, horses screamed. Boone fired back, each shot measured and deliberate. Ada took her aim, hit one rider clean off his horse, then ducked as bullets tore through the porch rail. "Barn!" Boone shouted. "They'll circle left." Ada followed him through the dust, lungs burning, hair sticking to her cheeks. The air stank of gunpowder and sweat. They slid into the barn just as a bullet cracked the top hinge. "Silas!" Boone barked. From the bunkhouse came the sound of frantic banging. "He's here!" Silas shouted. "Maddox is here!" Ada gritted her teeth. "Then so am I!" Boone loaded another round. "They'll try to flank. We hold them at the door." The men outside shouted orders. One voice rose above the rest, smooth, familiar, venomous. Royce Maddox. "Bring me the girl alive!" he roared. "Kill the cowboy!" Ada's jaw tightened. "Cowboy, huh?" she muttered. Boone's mouth curved, almost a smile. "He's not wrong." The next moments blurred. Shouts, the flash of muzzles, the raw heat of battle. Boone fired through the half-open doors, dropped one man. Another tried to rush the side window. Ada turned, shot first, and the man went down hard, the smell of blood mixed with dust. The horses kicked in panic, eyes wild. Boone reloaded, teeth clenched. "We can't keep them out forever." Ada looked around, desperate for an edge. Then she saw it, a row of lanterns hanging above the hay bales, oil full and ready. "Fire," she said. Boone turned to her, confused. "What?" "Fire, Boone. If they want the gate, give them something to fear crossing." He hesitated only a second, then nodded. They smashed the lanterns one by one, spilling oil across the hay and the floorboards. Boone struck a match, met Ada's eyes once, and dropped it. The fire caught like a living thing. It crawled up the beams, roared to life, turned the inside of the barn into a furnace. They ran out through the back door, just as the front exploded in a wave of heat. The flames burst upward, casting wild light across the ranch yard. Royce's men reeled back, shouting, blinded by the sudden blaze. Boone took the chance. He aimed, fired twice, clean and quick. 2 men fell. The rest scattered toward the east ridge. Ada stood at the fence, breathing hard, rifle smoking in her hands. Her hair glowed like copper in the firelight. Boone turned to her, sweat and soot streaking his face. "You just burned half your barn," he said. "It was my father's," she replied, "and he'd rather see it burn than see it taken." Boone gave a short nod, respect deepening behind his eyes. "You fight like him." She looked up at him. "You would have liked him." He studied her a moment. "I think I already do." Silence fell again, except for the crackle of burning wood. Boone holstered his gun. Ada watched the smoke curl into the morning sky. It looked almost peaceful now, like the land had taken a deep breath. Then came the sound of one more gunshot. Sharp. Close. Ada flinched. Boone spun. A figure stumbled from behind the bunkhouse. Silas, bleeding, clutching his side. "Royce!" he gasped. "He's still here!" Boone caught him before he fell. "Where?" Silas coughed, blood on his lips. "Gate. He's not done." Boone laid him down gently. "Stay still." Silas shook his head weakly. "You don't get it. He's not after the land anymore. He's after her." Boone's eyes flicked toward Ada, then toward the gate, where smoke drifted and the firelight flickered against metal. A shadow moved there, steady and patient, as if waiting for the right moment to strike. Royce Maddox. Ada raised her rifle again, but Boone's hand stopped her. "No," he said softly. "He's mine." She met his gaze. "Don't do this alone." "I ain't," he said, and stepped forward into the smoke. The fire cast his shadow tall and sharp across the dust. Every step he took sounded like memory, the sound of a man walking back toward something he'd been trying to escape. Ada's heart pounded as she watched him move into the haze. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of ash and danger. Boone reached the gate, the same place where the first shot had started everything. He stopped, shoulders squared, and called out into the burning dawn. "Royce, you wanted a reckoning. Come earn it." The echo rolled across the plains. Then another gun cocked in answer. "If this fire still burns inside you, don't turn away now. The dust hasn't settled, and the reckoning's just begun." The smoke thinned, but the light still bled red over the yard. Boone stood inside that glow, revolver low, body still. He could hear Royce's boots crunching through the gravel, slow and deliberate, like a man measuring the ground that might soon hold him. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing, Calder," Royce called. Boone answered, quiet. "I ain't easy to bury." Ada watched from the porch, rifle raised but heart hammering. The air between them was so heavy, it bent sound. She could see Royce's face now, hat gone, sweat streaked, eyes bright with rage and something darker, pride wounded deep. "You should have stayed driftin'," Royce said. "This ranch ain't yours to save." Boone's tone stayed even. "It ain't yours to steal." They circled each other in the dust, two shapes carved out of smoke and history. The fire behind them roared and cracked. Sparks lifted into the wind like wild stars. Royce spat into the dirt. "You think she's worth dying for? She'll forget your name before winter." Boone's jaw worked once. "Maybe, but she'll still have her land." Royce fired first. The shot tore the quiet apart. Boone moved sideways, the bullet catching his sleeve. He dropped to one knee, fired back. Royce stumbled, then steadied himself, blood blooming at his shoulder. Ada's scream cut through the air. "Boone!" He didn't look back. He waited for Royce to reload, waited for that tiny rhythm of metal and breath, and then walked forward, step by measured step. "You should have run when you had the chance," Boone said. Royce laughed, wild and cracked. "And leave you to play hero? You ain't no savior, Calder. I know who you were. Dodge City, 73. You left a man to die." Boone froze. The words struck deep. Ada's hand went to her mouth. "What is he talking about?" Royce grinned through his pain. "Tell her, Cowboy. Tell her who you really are." Boone's eyes never left him. "That man was my brother." The words came slow, weighted, and I didn't leave him. I buried him. The world seemed to shrink to the space between them. Boone fired once more. The shot hit clean. Royce fell back against the gate, slid down into the dust that had started this whole reckoning. His gun slipped from his hand. For a long second he just stared up at the sky that no longer belonged to him. Ada ran forward. Boone caught her halfway, staggering slightly. Blood seeped through his shirt near his ribs, not deep, but ugly. She pressed her hand there, trembling. "Hold still," she whispered. He gave a faint smile. "Ain't got plans to move fast." Royce coughed behind them, voice barely a rasp. "You think you won? There's more coming. Men who owe me. They'll burn it all." Ada looked down at him, eyes hard. "Then I'll rebuild it, like he just did." Royce's head tipped back. The light went out of him before he could answer. Boone sank to the ground, back against the fence. The fire's reflection danced over his face, softening the hard lines. Ada tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it to his wound. "Why didn't you tell me about Dodge City?" she asked. He looked at her with tired honesty. "Because some stories only heal when they're done bleeding." She stayed kneeling beside him. For the first time since her father died, she felt the world stop running away. Her hand stayed over his wound, his stayed over hers. The quiet between them wasn't fear anymore, it was belonging. The dawn came slow, painting the horizon in pale gold. Smoke rose from the barn, but the worst of the fire was dying. The land smelled of ash and rain. Boone tried to stand. Ada steadied him, and together they walked toward the house. The ranch gate creaked behind them, its metal scar catching the sun. Boone glanced back once. "That's twice this gate's seen blood for something worth keeping." Ada met his gaze. "Then it'll remember us." They reached the porch steps. Boone hesitated, breath shallow. Ada's voice softened. "You need rest." He shook his head, eyes distant. "Rest comes when you stop watching the horizon." She touched his arm. "Then rest here. I'll keep watch." He let her guide him inside. The fire in the hearth had gone out, but the warmth in the room came from somewhere else. She eased him into the chair by the window, the light brushing his hair like morning mercy. Outside the wind shifted, cooler now, carrying the scent of rain that promised cleansing. Ada stood by the window, watching it move through the charred fields. Behind her, Boone's voice came low. "You did good, Ada. So did you." He smiled faintly. "I just followed your lead." Her laugh was quiet, tired, real. She looked back at him and saw not the stranger who'd ridden in from nowhere, but the man who had stayed when the world burned. Boone's eyes closed, not from weakness, but from trust. Ada whispered, "You're safe now." Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, soft, distant, like a promise kept. If this storm's quiet ending touched you, stay close. The dust hasn't settled yet, and what follows may change everything. The rain came before sundown, soft at first, tapping against the tin roof like fingers finding a rhythm after too much silence. Ada stood by the window, watching it blur the blackened barn and wash the dust from the yard. The air smelled of wet ash and sage. For the first time in months, the land looked alive. Boone stirred behind her, a low sound of pain. He was lying on the couch, shirt unbuttoned, a clean bandage wrapped tight around his ribs. His skin was warm, his breathing shallow but steady. Ada turned. "You should be resting." He opened one eye, faint smile tugging at his mouth. "I was, till you started pacing holes through that floor." She exhaled, tension still clinging to her shoulders. "I can't sit still when the world's changing outside my door." He looked at her, really looked, and something softened in his eyes. "You did more than most would have done. You stood your ground." "I didn't have a choice," she said quietly. "Sure you did," he replied. "You just picked the harder one." She crossed her arms, half to hold herself together. "And you? You could have left when you saw what this place was." He hesitated. The lantern light caught the edge of his jaw, the faint stubble, the scar that ran like an old story down his collarbone. "I tried," he said finally. "But every road away from here felt wrong." Ada stepped closer. "Why?" Boone's gaze lifted to hers. "Because this land's got your fight in it, and maybe I needed to see someone still worth believing in." The words sat between them like warmth. She knelt beside him, close enough to feel his breath against her cheek. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the bandage. "Does it hurt?" He gave a half laugh. Only when I breathe. Then you should stop doing that, she said, a faint smile breaking through. He grinned, just barely. You telling me to die quiet, Miss Lark? She shook her head. I'm telling you to live careful. Rain thundered harder, drumming on the roof, echoing through the empty rooms. Ada's hand stayed where it was, resting on his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath. It was strong, too strong for a man who'd almost fallen. Boone's voice came low. You could sell this place, you know. Start new. No one'd blame you. Ada looked around the room, the old clock, the cracked window, the fire that refused to stay out. If I sold it, I'd never stop wondering what could have been saved. Boone nodded once, the kind of nod that meant he understood more than he'd ever say. Then I'll help you hold it. Her throat tightened. You've already done enough. No, he said softly, not near enough. The silence that followed was different this time. Not the heavy kind, but the stillness that comes after the storm finally surrenders. She stood, turned toward the hearth, and added another log. The flames caught slow, painting gold across the walls. Boone's voice followed her. I ain't good with peace, he said. Never learned how to sit still when things are quiet. Ada glanced over her shoulder. Then learn now. You're safe here. He studied her a long time, then nodded. Safe, he repeated, as if testing the word's weight. When the rain eased, the world outside was washed clean. The sky cleared just enough to show a streak of moonlight on the wet ground. Ada walked to the door, opened it, and let the cool air in. The scent of wet earth filled the room. Boone rose slowly, wincing, and joined her at the doorway. They stood side by side, shoulders almost touching. Tomorrow'll be work, she said quietly. Fence to mend, barn to rebuild. Rebuilding's easier than forgetting, Boone said. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the last flicker of lightning. Do you always talk like that? Only when I'm trying to sound wise, he said. She laughed, soft, real, unguarded. It startled her how natural it felt. Boone turned to her. His expression shifted, something raw beneath the calm. Ada. She met his gaze, and the world narrowed to the space between their breaths. He lifted his hand, paused, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered near her temple, tracing the faint dirt on her skin. She didn't move. The touch wasn't hunger, it was recognition. A moment of quiet where two wounds finally met and stopped bleeding. You don't have to be alone in this, he whispered. Ada's voice barely carried. Maybe I never was. Outside, thunder rolled one last time, far away. The storm had moved on, but the echo stayed. Boone dropped his hand, eyes lowering. You should rest. You too, she said, though neither of them stepped back. For a breath, for the smallest heartbeat, it seemed the whole world leaned closer, waiting. Then Ada whispered, Thank you. Boone smiled. For what? For staying. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. I told you, I ain't easy to bury. The rain began again, softer this time. She closed the door, but the warmth between them stayed. If this moment of quiet after the storm found a home in your chest, stay close. The fire between them is just starting to breathe. The morning came clear and cold. The rain had left everything shining, every blade of grass, every nail in the broken barn. The smell of wet cedar drifted through the yard. Ada stepped outside with 2 saddled horses and a folded map tucked under her arm. Boone was already tightening the cinch on his gelding. The bandage under his shirt pulled when he moved, but he didn't mention it. "You sure you want to ride so soon?" she asked. He gave her a small smile. "You sure you want to stay behind?" Ada swung into the saddle. "Then we ride." They headed east, where the land rose in slow red waves. The trail was soft from the storm, their horses sinking halfway to the fetlocks. The air felt washed clean, but danger never really washed away. It just hid deeper. Boone studied the tracks that crossed the road, fresh wagon wheels, 4 men on horseback. "Royce wasn't working alone," he said. "Someone higher paid for all this." Ada nodded. "Silas said Maddox was collecting debts." "But whose? Maybe a man who never signs his own name." They rode in silence for a while. The sky opened wide above them, a hard, endless blue. Ada felt the weight of it pressing on her, the same way loneliness had always done, but now it pressed softer because Boone rode beside her. By noon they reached the ridge. Smoke curled far off to the north. Boone raised the spyglass. Camp, 2 wagons, could be Maddox's buyers. Ada's stomach tightened. "Then that's where we start." They dismounted behind a line of rocks. From there they could see everything. The men loading crates, the brand marks on the cattle hides stacked for sale. Her father's brand. Anger flared hot and clean. "That's our herd," she whispered. Boone's voice stayed calm. "We'll take proof, not blood, for now." She turned to him. "For now?" His mouth curved slightly. "Depends how polite they feel." They waited until dusk. The wind dropped. The prairie hushed. One man left the fire, walked toward the creek. Boone followed. Ada watched, heart pounding. She saw the shapes move, the quick struggle, the muffled grunt. Boone returned a minute later with a small ledger and a torn badge. "Sheriff Danner's mark," he said. "Looks like he's been on their payroll." Ada's face went pale. "The sheriff? Explains why Maddox rode free so long?" Boone flipped through the pages. Names, amounts, shipments, enough to hang half the valley if it got out. Ada's voice hardened. "Then we make it get out." They hid the ledger in her saddlebag and started back toward the ranch, but the moon was rising and the wind was shifting. Somewhere behind them, a horse snorted, too close, too alert. "They know," Boone said quietly. "Ride." The chase began without words. Hooves thundered over the wet ground, sparks flying from stones. The night tore past in streaks of silver and shadow. Ada could hear the riders closing, 5 of them, guns drawn. Boone fired once behind him, turning his horse sideways to block the path. "Go!" he shouted. "No!" Ada wheeled her horse beside him. "We ride together." He looked at her then. Really looked. The kind of look that says everything words never will. "You're trouble, Ada Lark." "Then you'd best keep up." They galloped hard toward the dry creek bed. Bullets hissed through the air like angry bees. Ada leaned low over the saddle horn, wind tearing her hair loose. Boone fired again, hit one rider, then another. The rest fell back. They reached the far ridge and slid from their horses, crouching behind a fallen log. The moonlight glinted off Boone's revolver. Ada's breath came quick, but her eyes were steady. "Are you hit?" she asked. "Not enough to stop," he said. Then, softer, "You did good." The danger still hummed around them, but it was fading now, replaced by something else. The nearness of his voice, the heat of his arm brushing hers, the sudden quiet that felt almost holy. Ada looked out over the valley. "We can't go back yet. If Danner's part of it, he'll be waiting." Boone nodded. "Then we ride for the canyon. There's a cabin there. Old line shack from my drifting days." She met his gaze. "Yours?" He shrugged. "Every drifter leaves a piece of himself somewhere." They mounted again and rode under a rising moon, its light silver on the wet grass. When they finally reached the canyon, the cabin stood waiting, leaning, half broken but dry. Inside, Boone lit a small lamp. The walls smelled of cedar and old smoke. Ada set the ledger on the table, hands shaking just a little. "If this is real," she said, "we can clear my father's name. Maybe save the ranch." Boone's eyes softened. "We will." She looked up at him. "You sound sure." He smiled faintly. "I've learned not to bet against a woman with a cause." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of breath, warmth, and the shared knowing that they were no longer running alone. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon mouth. Boone stepped close, took the lamp from her hand, and set it on the shelf. "Get some sleep," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch." Ada met his eyes in the flicker of light. "Boone, when this ends, what happens then?" He paused, jaw tightening. "We survive first. Then we find out what we're still made of." She nodded, but neither moved away. For a long heartbeat, the space between them felt like the edge of something new. Then Boone turned toward the door, shoulders squared against the night. "Rest easy, Ada," he murmured. "You're safe. I'll see to that." And outside, beyond the canyon walls, a single rider stopped on the ridge, watching their light from afar. Another shadow in a world that refused to stay quiet. If the ride through danger still beats in your chest, stay close. The firelight hasn't shown all its truths yet. The canyon held its breath. Boone sat by the door with his rifle across his knees, listening to the wind move through the rocks. The lamp inside burned low, soft light flickering over Ada's sleeping face. She had finally drifted off near dawn, wrapped in his old coat, her hair spilling across his saddle blanket like river water. He tried not to watch her, but the quiet made him. Every slow breath she took sounded like the promise of something he'd never thought he'd deserve again. When the sun came, pale and cautious, Boone stepped outside. The air was sharp, smelling of wet stone and pine. He walked to the creek that wound below the cabin and knelt to wash the blood from his sleeve. The cold bit deep, but it cleared his head. Behind him, Ada's voice came soft. "You didn't sleep." He looked over his shoulder. She stood at the door, wrapped in a blanket, eyes still heavy with dreams. "I slept enough," he said. "You always say that." She came closer, the blanket dragging through the dust. The morning light caught her face, tired, determined, beautiful in the way the frontier makes you, carved by weather and loss. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Boone hesitated. About what a man becomes when he stops running. Maybe I'm about to find out. Ada stepped beside him, looked down at the creek. I used to think peace was something you built, but maybe it's just something you stop destroying. He smiled faintly. You talk like someone who's been rebuilding too long. Maybe I have. They stood there a while, the world waking around them. Birds called from the cliffs, and the sun painted the rocks red and gold. For the first time in weeks, Ada felt her heart slow. Then Boone's head lifted. He turned toward the ridge. Riders, he said quietly. 2. Ada's hand went to her revolver. Danner? Or what's left of him? They saddled fast, hid the ledger under the floorboard, and stepped outside. 2 men rode down the slope, the sheriff and another behind him, clean-shaven, dressed too fine for the dust. The second man wore a black coat and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Lark," Danner called. "Boone, we've been looking for you." Ada's jaw tightened. "Seems you found us easy." The man in black dismounted first, boots polished, movements smooth. "Name's Grant Harrow," he said. "Investor out of Santa Fe. I believe you've got something that belongs to me." Boone's eyes narrowed. "You mean that ledger full of lies?" Grant's smile widened. "Lies are what the powerful call proof they didn't write." Danner shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Harrow." "Quiet, Sheriff," Grant snapped. "You've done your part." Ada's stomach turned. "He's working for you." Grant tilted his head, amused. "Everyone works for someone, Miss Lark." "Your father did too." The words hit her like a whip. "You don't speak his name." Grant stepped closer. "He borrowed money from me. When he couldn't pay, the land was promised. Maddox simply made a mess of collecting." Boone's hand hovered near his gun. "Then I'll finish what Maddox started. For good." Grant laughed softly. "Violence again. That's all you drifters ever understand." Boone didn't move. "Sometimes it's the only language a coward listens to." Danner's voice shook. "Boone, don't do this. You shoot him, and the whole territory'll come down on you." Boone looked at Ada. Her eyes were wet but steady. "He's lying," she said. "My father never borrowed a cent." Grant smiled wider. "Then I suppose we'll let the law decide. Hand over the ledger, and maybe I'll let you keep the house." Boone's jaw hardened. "You'll never see that ledger." Grant sighed, almost bored. "Then I'll take it off your corpse." He moved for his gun. Boone was faster. The crack split the canyon wide. Grant fell hard, dust rising around him like smoke from a cold fire. Danner's hand went to his own revolver, but Ada stepped forward, rifle aimed steady. "Don't," she said. The sheriff froze. His face had gone grey. "You don't understand, Ada. He owned everything. The ranch, the banks." "Not anymore," Boone said. Danner looked between them, fear hollowing his eyes. "You'll never outrun what's coming." Boone shook his head. "I ain't running." The sheriff turned his horse and rode off without another word, the sound of hooves fading down the valley. Silence returned, heavy and final. Boone holstered his gun and exhaled. Ada stared at Grant's body, rain beginning to fall again, soft and cold. "It's over," she whispered. Boone looked at her, voice low. "No, Ada, it's beginning." She turned to him. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, eyes tired but clear. I spent half my life losing things. Land, people, my own name. You're the first thing I ever fought for and didn't lose. Her breath caught. Boone. He took her hand, rough and warm. You still got your ranch, but if you'll have me, you won't have to keep it alone. The rain thickened, blurring the world into silver streaks. Ada squeezed his hand. Then stay. Not as a hired man, as someone who belongs. Boone nodded once. I already do. They walked back to the cabin, the storm closing around them like a curtain. Inside, the fire still glowed faintly, the only witness to what was left of a long night. If this storm of truth has quieted something inside you, stay close. One last dawn waits on the horizon, and it's finally time for peace. The rain stopped some time before dawn. When the first light broke over the canyon, it found Ada standing by the door, coffee in hand, watching the mist rise from the wet ground. The sky looked washed clean. Everything did. The smoke from last night's fire drifted low and pale, curling upward into a new day. Boone stepped out behind her, boots soft on the wooden floor. His bandage was clean now, his shirt buttoned, his breath easy. The weight he'd carried in his shoulders seemed lighter. "Morning," he said. Ada turned, smiled faintly. "You slept?" "Some." He looked out across the valley. "You?" "Didn't need to." The silence between them wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was rest. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm that finally spent itself. Below them, the land lay open and green. The barn was gone, only a black frame against the light, but the fences stood and the horses grazed near the stream. The world, wounded and wide, was still breathing. Boone walked to the edge of the porch, hands in his pockets. "You could start again here," he said. "Build it stronger." Ada stepped beside him. "I will, with help." He glanced at her. "You'll have it?" They stood that way for a long moment, the wind moving through their clothes, carrying the smell of rain and cedar. Ada looked up at him. "You still plan on riding out?" He shook his head slowly. "Not today." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's not calling yet." She smiled, small and real. "Then stay until it does." Boone looked down at his hands, then at her face. "You sure?" Ada reached up and touched his cheek, light as a whisper. "I am." The touch held. The world seemed to pause around it, the horses still, the creek hushed, the last of the rain sliding from the roof. Boone leaned into her hand like a man learning what safety feels like. He took her wrist gently, lowered her hand to his chest. "You ever wonder," he said, "if all the hurt we carry just leads us here?" Ada's voice trembled. "Only when it's worth it." Boone's thumb brushed her jaw. The space between them closed. Their foreheads met first, quiet, sure, without hunger. Then their lips, soft, uncertain, like the first breath after too long underwater. The kiss didn't ask, it promised, a slow, healing promise. When they pulled apart, the light had changed. The sun cleared the rim of the canyon, spilling gold over everything. Boone exhaled and laughed under his breath. "Looks like the day's got ideas." Ada's smile was warm. "So do I." He raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "Rebuild the barn," she said. "Fix the fences. Plant alfalfa where the ground burned." He nodded. "All good work." "And after that," she added, teach a certain stubborn cowboy what peace feels like. Boone grinned, slow and easy. That might take a lifetime. I've got one to spare. He took her hand. They walked down toward the pasture together, boots sinking into the soft earth. The morning breeze lifted their hair, tugged at the edges of their coats. Behind them, the old gate still stood, the iron scar from gunfire catching the sunlight. Ada glanced back at it once, then at Boone. Think it'll hold? Boone squeezed her hand. It held us. The sound of the creek filled the quiet. The sky widened. Every color of the land, red clay, green sage, gold light, came alive again. Ada stopped, looked around the valley, and breathed deep. "This was my father's dream," she said softly. "Now it's ours." Boone turned toward her. "Then we'd better keep it honest," she nodded. "And keep it safe." He smiled. "That part I know how to do." For a moment neither spoke. The world was enough. Boone tipped his hat, looked to the east where the sun rose over the plains. "Guess we made it." Ada stepped closer. "Guess we did." They stood together as the light spread, quiet as prayer. And for the first time since the first shot at the ranch gate, the wind felt gentle. If this story has touched a quiet place in your heart, let it stay a while. Like, share, or leave your name in the dust so this western fire keeps burning for you.